How to access the Emergency Response Data Platform. Any public safety agency can access life-saving emergency data through the RapidSOS Emergency Response Data Platform. There are two ways of doing so. RapidSOS Portal is a powerful web-based tool that enables you to manage emergencies and access location and supplemental data for every call in your jurisdiction. Signing up for RapidSOS Portal is easy and only takes a few minutes. In addition to emergency management tools and data, RapidSOS Portal includes a training platform as well as administrative tools to manage user permissions, track usage, and analyze trends in your agency. To learn more and sign up for RapidSOS Portal, please visit rapidsosportal.com. RapidSOS also integrates with every major CAD, CPE, mapping, or other public safety softwares. With an integration, you can receive RapidSOS data through your existing workflow, and you won't need any additional screens, tabs, or windows. To learn more about integrations, visit rapidsos.com/public-safety-partners.
If you are stumbling upon this video on YouTube and it is after, I would say today, June 19th, even though we were officially ending on June 21st, this will be the last live session. And if you would like access to all of the previous recorded materials from this last session, go ahead and head over to onsceneFirst.com/training/study ENP and fill out the form there, and you will be added to the Google group where you are able to access all of the recordings, the PDFs, as well as the MP3s and any practice exams and any other materials that I have sent. All right. My computer's acting wonky. Usually I'm on a much bigger screen, so I apologize. If you do want to be notified of any of the fun, cool things that I do on a regular basis, head on over to the website onscenefirst.com and go ahead and register there for our newsletter. There'll be one that's going out in the very near future. So if you want to head on over there as well. I want to say thank you to RapidSOS, my premier study group sponsor. They have been with me since the beginning of the first session as we close out the last live session for now, and it is number 8. So lots of ENPs have come through the live sessions. Doesn't mean that I'm not going to have the materials available and update them accordingly. I'm just realizing that having a consistent day for a period of time is proving to be a bigger challenge. And so I will continue with the study group. It's just going to be kind of behind the scenes. So now on with the show. So 50% of the exam is going to be classified as 911 management. It's going to be broken down into 2 sections. And I highly recommend, whether or not you've been in this profession for a long time, if you have been a director for many years, you think that you have the operations stuff down, you still need to review this material. A lot of folks that have been in the center for a long time will come back and say, wow, that was challenging information. I thought that if I focused on the technology piece, or what they call kind of operations side of things, then I would be fine on the 911 management. And if you're on the vendor side and you haven't spent any time in the 911 center, but you're still qualified to take the exam, you need to put the work in over here because there's just some questions that many of us might never have even thought about touching in our time in the 911 center. So definitely put some time here. As usual, I try my best to come up with some little tricks and tips to help you guys remember it. I have a couple for this week's session, but a lot of it is just providing you with a PowerPoint slide where everything is broken down. And I'm also going to show you an example of some of the quiz questions that are going to start appearing each week as long as time allows. If not, you'll definitely be getting them all in the near future for some little quizzes on the topics that we're covering that week. So I've been able to successfully figure out how to do that rather quickly. So it's a good thing. So this first section is 911 and the management of the organization. Okay. So the next section, actually, there'll probably still be a little bit more of the organization. But then during one of the management sessions, we will be going over the management of the employee. And that's going to be a little bit more of the information, and then legislation as well that goes in there. And then we're going to circle back around and get back into the technology piece. I've learned that by putting the more challenging technology piece towards the end, it is more beneficial for folks because it's fresh in their head and they realize how much they actually have to learn, and they can kind of buckle down and put their nose to the grindstone, if you will. So this first section is we're going to talk about procurement and budgeting and RFPs and all that stuff. And again, I always I give you as much information as I think they are looking for. I hope that it's spot on. I hope that it is helpful. It's a little challenging sometimes looking at the study guide and the body of knowledge. They don't always line up with each other, and I don't always know how deep they want us to go with the topic. So I do my best. So as far as budgeting goes, most PSAPs have two budgeting processes. One is operational and one is capital. And we're going to go ahead and go through both of those. So operational is what we deal with on a yearly basis. Most years in a 911 center will go from July 1st to June 30th. So it spans over 12 months. These are the funds that are dealing with the agency's operational costs: payroll, utilities, supplies, rent, leases, system maintenance. This is usually the stuff that we're using every day in the 911 center, and we have to purchase on a regular basis. Those are things that we can kind of predict. We know when we're going to need them, and we need all of these things to be operational. On the capital side, these are usually long-term major processes. They're usually over 5 years, this process. And this is when we are needing to update our phone systems, CADs, radios, consoles. These are big ticket purchases. This isn't paper and pens and elastics. These are the big ticket items, and they have to, it has to kind of be spelled out over this process. And then there are certain things that you're going to need to procure the funding for these larger ticket items. So we're going to break it down into wants, needs, and the actual procurement process. So this process right here, NENA request for proposal consideration information document, in the PDF, this will be a clickable link. There used to be a actual like URL that I was able to post, but the URL doesn't actually bring you here. It just brings you to the main page. So if you copy this URL or the extension or click on the link in the PDF, it should bring you there. This is not specific to a generalized process. It's kind of specific to the next gen kind of proposal and process. But a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about are in here as well. So I always, one, recommend the links that they recommend in the study guide, as well as the any place that can provide additional information, because I can't put everything in and I don't know what everything that should be in there. So, but the other thing is the way that the guide is set up, as well as the body of knowledge, as well as my thought process and what should go first. And I'm not really sure. So I have placed the slides where I think they make the most logical sense. So if you're following the PDF along with your study guide or your body of knowledge, they might not be in the same exact order as they are on there, because it doesn't make sense to me to explain the planning and implementation process the way they have it at the end, because we will have already talked about those things. So as far as the planning and implementation process goes, when we have to make a larger ticket item purchase, it's the tactical or short-term planning efforts will begin after the research is complete and the best options are selected for a project. There are three important areas when it comes to any type of major purchase. First of all, the timetable for the project. How long is this going to take us? Or how long should it take us? The big question is, what is it going to cost? And so what is the budget for the implementation, and who is going to be doing what on the project? And so we're going to break down the assignment of duties in what we should be looking for there. So assignment of duties is a unique skill set that should be considered when selecting the person that is going to be doing certain things, right? The second thing is they have to be willing to do the thing, whatever it is, whether they're going to be the manager of the project manager, or maybe they'll be the secretary of it, like kind of keeping track of all the things. I've learned of late, or over the last few years, that there are things that I just should not be doing. One, with my personality style, and two, with my ADHD, that while I am a great verbalizer and communicator, the actual part of documentation and the tasky things, yeah, I don't love them, and I probably will no longer put myself in a position to undertake large tasky things. So making sure that the person is willing and able and just capable of doing the task. Again, timetables, budgets, and expectations are a must. One of the things that I've learned recently is, again, with the personality styles, there are certain personality styles that will take exactly what you say exactly the way that it is. So a very simple instruction could be misinterpreted by someone. So especially in a major purchase, making sure that the communication is on point and that everybody is on the same page. And then the compensation for the person that is going to be undertaking this particular this job. This is one of those things that folks don't always do. Some folks in the center will, but there's a lot of big changes that take place in a 911 center. And so if it's written into your job description that you're going to do these things, great. If it's not, and now you are handed a flaming bag of what, it might be necessary to go back to the table and negotiate for financial compensation based on the magnitude of the project that you're working on. When you are looking at the assignment of duties, consider a project manager. Some larger agencies, they might actually have somebody that is on staff for this, and the smaller agencies might have to have somebody doing the dual role. So it might actually be the director or the deputy director, or maybe even a supervisor, depending on how small the agency is. And that project manager's role is to keep the vendor on task and manage expectations and deadlines. So again, making sure that you have the right person in the role for that. As far as the conceptual system goes, it's basically just that. You're developing the concept of what it is that we are going to be accomplishing as we are moving forward with the procurement process. So the conceptual process could be just, all right, the concept is we need to get a generator and it needs to work every time the power goes out. That's kind of a what is it that we need versus it has to have this, and this before we start going through the process of the procurement. It describes what the product should do rather than how it should do it. So to go in line with what I just said, I need a generator to turn on when the power goes out, and I need it to provide electricity to the entire police department or half the police department or parts of the police department. And so that's what it needs to do. But how it's going to need to do it, that's going to be a little bit further down the line. And it can be used to justify the budget and the procurement. As far as the planning goes, we have 4 different types of stages, if you will. First is the short term, which plans to address the immediate needs. So say we had an issue with the our generator not working, and I know I've used that example before, and it just seems to be one that works. Our generator did not work during one of our major power outages, and we need to do something in the interim. So does that mean we have to purchase, a separate generator just so we can at least get the communication center up and running if there should be a power outage before we're able to replace the entire thing? The long-term range is plans to forecast for future requirements. So what that might mean in this case is, yeah, we have a great big generator and it can do most of the 911 center, but guess what? It didn't work. So does that mean that we put a smaller one in place? So if we should lose that, at least we have the primary area of the center or the communication center with power. That's would be considered the long-term range. Strategic plans that also align with the procurement and organizational goals. And then the continuity of operations. COOP, there's a couple of places that we will see this. We saw it once in the emergency management, and we're going to see it here. And that's the plans to ensure operational resilience in the face of disruption. So continuity of operations, let's make sure we put it back either the way that it was if it had been damaged. If not, we have to put it back better or maybe redundant as well. So integrating these planning perspectives helps organizations navigate uncertainties, optimize procurement practices, and maintain operational resilience. So you can't just wing it. Sometimes you can just go purchase something quickly, but if it's a big ticket item, you have to go through some of these stages. So as we're looking at a capital budget or long-term needs, we're going to have to do a needs assessment. That needs assessment will kind of start, say you're building a new 911 center, you're renovating, you have some grant money, whatever it is. Before you do any major project or changes, you should do a needs assessment. And that's before starting any type of process, right? Any purchasing process. So we have to identify the exact needs and the requirements. They must be defined, and especially the needs of the telecommunicator. I know that in many 911 centers, the telecommunicator gets overlooked and folks above them are making decisions based on their behalf. I was in an agency not that long ago, and one of the computers that they needed on a regular basis was behind them to the left. So everything they did here, but this particular computer that they used on a regular basis was behind them to the left, and that it was not practical. So under the consulting rule, it's like that needs to be moved up here because it's not going to get used. Something could get overlooked, and it's taking away from the flow of what the telecommunicator is doing. And so while an IT person says, I have the space over here, it makes sense to me for it to be over here. The needs of the telecommunicator need to be taken into consideration. And I'll say that louder for the people in the back. The needs can be done by either the staff that's on duty or a study taking things into consideration, doing a survey in the center, doing a survey outside the center, going on to Facebook. I see these all the time. Hey, we're building a new center. What is a must have? And I'm just curious, does anyone know what the most common thing is that folks say has to be in a 911 center? If they're rebuilding or remodeling, or they have the opportunity to make a big purchase, if you're on and you want to just put it in the chat, I'll try to remember to tell you in a few minutes. I'm just curious if anyone knows what keeps coming back at the top of the list of something that has to be in a 911 center. And these things, well, bathroom, yes. Windows, that's a good one, but nope, there's one more. And then they can be broken down into two categories: must-haves and nice-to-haves. And so the must-haves would be chairs. The nice-to-have would be a window. Must-have would be a bathroom. Nice-to-have, are you ready for the number one thing that comes back in the majority of the assessments I do? An ice machine. An ice machine. Yep. And they're very specific about their ice too. It has to be a certain kind of ice, but if at minimum, if you want to make your folks happy, get them an ice machine. It is a hot commodity, but USB chargers, I like that too. But so an ice machine would be a nice to have versus a must have. So there we go. And then here's a couple of things as far as the procurement process goes. Once the conceptual design is approved, the RFP can start to be developed. The RFP is a request for a proposal, and we're going to go ahead and go over that in just a couple of minutes. The RFP is sent to determine the list of vendors. It may be advertised in a local newspaper, trade magazines, or it could be emailed to folks that you know are going to be interested in this particular project. And usually the submission window is going to be anywhere from 45 to 90 days. The bigger the project, the longer the time is that you would probably offer. Submissions are ranked in order of the most compliant, or rather they should be, right? So they have a lot of boxes that need to be checked. And then if they don't have one box checked, but they have a different box checked, then we start going through that after. The top vendors may then be asked to give an oral presentation with a product demonstration, depending on what it is that you're looking to purchase. And once the top vendor is selected through the appropriate process, then the negotiations of the financial piece begin. The contract may be a combination from both the agency and the vendor. So most vendors have their own contracts, and then most centers have their own contracts. And so what they do is they try to merge the two together and make sure that everybody is happy. So now we're going to go through just a few of the different types of, I don't know what you would call them, requests for, I guess. But I have these broken down into the focus, criteria, and the purpose of them. But again, I'll say this over and over again. One of the easiest ways for me when I study is to kind of not look at the whole word, the whole sentence, right? Is just to kind of look at the most important words. So in this case, I'm going to get rid of the request for, and I'm going to look at what a bid is, right? So if you think about when you go to an auction, or the phrase that we hear often when it goes into when somebody's referring to something that was purchased in a government entity is it's clear it went to the lowest bidder, right? So when you say it's clear that it went to the lowest bidder, or the lowest bidder would get it, or this must have been the lowest bidder's work, it means that it was a financial decision. They were the cheapest, So we went with them. So there wasn't a whole lot of information that went through to get this particular information. So that's what you're going to see in the definition. So not a ton of information. It's a request for a bid, right? So it's centrally focused on the cost as the main criteria. And so if you just kind of focus on that bid and being the lowest bidder, it has to do with a financial obligation. Okay. The primary goal is to obtain the lowest price bid that meets the specified requirement. So goes to the lowest bidder. There we go. It emphasizes adherence to specific predefined requirements or specifications, and the bidder must meet the minimum criteria to be considered. The purpose used when organization's primary concern is the cost. So when it comes down to any question that you see that is very specifically identifying cost and nothing else, chances are it's going to be the request for a bid, lowest bidder. Okay. And then when you are bidding on something in an auction, you're not getting a whole lot of detail, right? So think about going to one of those storage wars, which my friend's been doing lately, and I just think it's hilarious, but he's got some really good stuff out of there. But they don't really know what's in the storage unit. They're just paying money for it. They're just giving an amount, and it's going, in that case, it's going to the highest bidder, right? So all based on money. Request for proposal, and the reason why I have the engagement ring there is because we know that goes along with a proposal. So take out the request for and specifically focus on the proposal. I am not going to say yes to that proposal unless I know all the things. So the RFP is going to have all the things. It's going to be the most detailed. It's going to give you a ton of information. It considers things beyond cost. So the vendor's experience, their approach, creativity, added value. While the cost is essential, it's not the determining factor. So my husband's famous phrase is, you get what you pay for. So sometimes cheaping out isn't always the best way to go. So the request for proposal evaluates proposals based on various criteria. Okay. So all the things, if there's a whole bunch of things listed, chances are it's going to be the request for proposal. Will they ask a question on which order things go in? I don't think so, because not every agency does things the exact same way. And sometimes they ask for a proposal, an RFP right out of the gate. Sometimes they'll just ask a request for a bid. Some might put out a request for information, which we'll talk about in just a second. But the request for the proposal is usually when they're starting over with something and they want all the details. So just like that ring right there, you're not going to accept the ring unless you have all the details, right? The request for a quote, which would come after the request for proposal. So basically, I'm going to give you all of the things. And this is about the ballpark that we're going to be in for this particular project under that RFP. So once I've decided, okay, hey, Acme Tool Company and, whatever the other company is, I have it narrowed down to the two of you. Now I'm going to request a quote, but I'm going to need this, this, and this added or this changed. And now that quote is going to serve as a negotiation tool. So the quote is just that. It's a quote. It primarily concentrates on obtaining pricing information for specific goods or services outlined in the request. The main goal is to compare and select the most cost-effective supplier vendor based on those qualified specifications. Okay. So while you have the request for a bid, that's kind of generalized, right? Hey, I could do this. I could do it for about $1,500. I'm thinking, right? So I'm going to put that bill in, and then now I want a more detailed quote. So we're not just going to kind of go with a ballpark figure there. And then the request for information, I have kind of just the facts. Oops, just the facts up there. Just the facts. The focus here, it aims to gather general information from the potential vendors about their capabilities, their products and services, industry experts, without seeking pricing or bids. They don't want to put a price tag on it yet. They just kind of want to get some unofficial information. What makes you so valuable for this job? And this may even be, something that they're doing on their own, researching it online, etc. But it's pretty simple, straightforward recommendation for just information, but not including money. So just the facts, no money, just the facts. It's used to gather preliminary information about available solutions, understand what's out there. So, maybe, hey, I don't know much about this particular product. Could you just give me some more information about it? And then we'll go from there. Request for qualifications is just that. I want to know what your qualifications are. And I know I'm not reading all of the information on these slides. It doesn't make sense for me to do that. But the information is there if you should want to peruse it. I'm just trying to give you all of the information and little tips and tricks to remember what each one is. So the request for qualifications, it primarily centers around evaluating and pre-qualifying vendors or services based on their qualifications, expertise, and capabilities that are relevant to the organization's needs. It's about assessing their suitability to participate in subsequent phases of the procurement process. So, you really need to be careful in which companies you're choosing to come and work into your 911 center. So I need to know what your qualifications are. When I look at some of the console cleaning companies, there's a few out there, and it's kind of a big deal when they say that they are CJIS certified, right? So then that when they can show that their qualifications are they're CJIS certified, then those folks can be in your center and they know the magnitude of confidentiality and all the things that they needed to learn to be able to pass that particular certification. So it's kind of like a resume, right? Qualifications, resume, what you look like on paper. And then sometimes there is a pre-bid or a proposal, and that might just be an organization holds a meeting to say, hey, if you're a vendor that provides 911 phone systems or CADs or radio systems, on this date and this time, we're going to have a generalized meeting to talk about the magnitude of our project. And we would like to open it up to everyone. Can't do it privately because then we're bordering on some ethics shenanigans. But the meetings can allow the folks that are doing the project to explain some things that, may warrant some questions, etc. And this is the opportunity to do that. So before the bid, before the proposal, a generalized meeting to be able to answer any questions. As far as the procurement methods, policies, procedures, and laws go, they vary by jurisdiction, right? So some jurisdictions say if you're going to purchase anything over $1,000, it has to go through a procurement process. Some say anything over $5,000. Some say anything over $10,000. If you don't know, you need to ask. You don't want to be asking for forgiveness on something that you should have asked about making a large purchase. That could not work out very well in your favor. The more formal process is the RFP, and the informal process is just asking for a quote. And then sometimes there's a piggyback quote, which is if there's a state bid that it just means that this bid or this is the amount that the state has agreed is an appropriate price. for this. So you can actually piggyback onto what has already been provided to the state as a generalized state bid or state quote system. A change order is just that. It's a modification to the original specifications and or the cost to which the parties mutually agree. Change orders are usually a result of an unexpected situation that could not be easily foreseen when the specifications were developed. So in this case, they gave an example of a new piece of equipment being swapped out for something because it's that model number or that particular unit is no longer available and you have no choice but to go up to the next version of it. Or there might be additional parts because once they got under your console, they realized that you didn't have the doohickey what's it dangle and you needed that as well. So the change order would be submitted, worked through with both parties, and then they would agree to make that change. However, they should be kept to a minimum. You don't want to keep changing things in the procurement process. Okay. And then as far as the decision making goes, when it comes to various options and alternatives, these are some areas where things should be evaluated before any action is taken regarding these major purchases. So we'll go through these. Political considerations. When we look at political considerations, it could be something as simple as you have two jurisdictions, you have this sheriff's department and this sheriff's department, and they're run by two different sheriffs. And now we're crossing over lines and who's going to be in charge, etc. That could be considered political, as well as are we crossing over between public and private partners, a government agency versus a private entity. Our operational considerations. Does the solution or service make sense for our organization, or are we just going to wing it and see how it works? I just got a little bit of nostalgia that came back when we were looking for a fire department notification system. I had gotten the information from a vendor at the APCO conference, and I tried really hard to make their product work in our center, but it was just too large for what we needed. We were a very small agency, and they tried to make it worth our while. They were very good, and they did not charge us, but it didn't work out. So operationally, is this going to make sense for this particular center? Financial obligation, is it cost effective and is it reasonable? Right? So we have lots of products that are available out there. We have some that are very reasonable, like free, and then we have some that are astronomically priced, and it doesn't even make sense to me how some folks could charge for some of the things that they do. But the financial cost has to be taken into consideration. And then legislative decisions. I'll tell you that as a one-person 911 center in the year 2011, I did not want to be providing EMD instructions, not because I didn't think we were capable. We ended up being very capable of doing it. I was very proud of my team and how they very meticulously call processed with one person and completed EMD on almost every call, as well as dispatching police, fire, and EMS. But we didn't have a choice. So legislatively has to do with the decision-making process. Massachusetts in June of 2012, there was a mandate that said every 911 call will have EMD provided. You can either do it yourself or you can ship it out, and we're going to pay for it. We're going to pay for the training. We're going to pay for, whatever the product is, and we'll take care of it. But this is what the legislation says. So sometimes the decisions are being made outside of your control. NG911 system. administration. Does it meet the standards? There are NENA I3 standards, and there are, certain standards that are out there when it comes to how things are moving through the network, et cetera. Does it meet those standards? That's part of your decision. Will it work with our vendor partners? I'm sorry, with our other partners like our police, our fire, our EMS? Are we able to access other agencies' information? Are we able to talk on the same radio? All of those are decision considerations. And database management is also part of that decision. So, will it do what is needed? And who will own it? Who's going to maintain that database? And this one's not listed, but this is a Tracy tip. This is take this for what it's worth. I'm talking about it, so it's important to mention it. Is ethics needs to be made in a decision. Maybe my brother-in-law is a great electrician, or he's a great IT person, and I want to hire him to do this job. No, stay far away from that. Unfortunately, I had a little mishap with the ethics commission in Massachusetts, and while it was ultimately an error of ignorance, not intention, and I got a slap on the wrist, it's still not a very good feeling to have to go through something like that. So when you're making those decisions, all these considerations should be taken into effect, and the added bonus for the ethics there. This is a Gantt timetable chart. Some agencies are using this type of tracking to track major projects. There should be some type of timetable tracking in place, whether you make up your own spreadsheet or use something like the Gantt chart here. It must be reasonable. The timelines must be reasonable, and always add for wiggle room, right? Because nothing in public safety goes the way that it's supposed to. And it should be detailed. However, it should have that flexibility, right? And then whoever is responsible for what should be listed. So it's not a matter of, well, I didn't know I was supposed to be doing that, and I didn't take care of it. So there's that. So that's all we have on that procurement process. That was the material that was in the manual and on the body of knowledge. So I hope the little tips and tricks were beneficial. And then we're going to cover the public education and our media relations. And we're going to kill two birds with one stone on this. Wasn't sure how long the other one was going to take, but we have a little bit of time. So I'll go ahead and get this section done as well. So according to the Public Relations Society of America, the PRSA. And if anyone has any questions about the procurement process, go ahead and put them in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer those if I have the answer. If not, I'll know where to find them. But according to the Public Relations Society of America, there is a difference between public education and public relations. So public education has historically been used in public safety communications industry to describe the outreach. How are we outreaching to our communities to educate folks, to share information, knowledge, etc. And then public relations is a strategic communication process that builds mutually beneficial relationships between organizations and their public. And if I am not mistaken, I do recall a question on the difference between public education and public relations, or something of that nature, right? So if you think of the education, it's sharing of knowledge. That's what education is. And then if the relations, think of relationship building, it's not just throwing information out there, it's building ongoing relationships so we can work together in the midst of crazy chaos. So I'll break the two down even further. Public education is obviously an important part of our 911 industry. It focuses on delivering a specific message to help educate the public. And I'm going to give you some examples of those specific messages in just a few minutes. The public education for 911 usually comes in the way of going into the schools, maybe safety fairs. And today we're doing a little bit more with social media, which I love. I love seeing. The public education is usually pens, coloring books, um, but it's important that you do not reinvent the wheel. I want to share this resource with you. So, NPEF, National Public Safety Educator Forum, that is located at that website, 911npef.org, is an amazing resource. They have a conference each year. Last few years has been virtual. I've spoke at that, but there is the ability, you can go to their website, you can join for free, and they have lots of resources. And then if they have their in-person conference, I want to say it's in different areas of the country, but definitely check it out. They have a lot of great things to help with public safety, public 911 communication stuff. And then public relations is that strategic communications process that builds a relationship that focuses on interaction with diverse stakeholders. So lots of different stakeholders. So our user agencies. So if we have our communication center, our police, our fire, our EMS, animal control, highway department, our government officials, whether you have a mayor, board of selectmen, etc., the media. We'll talk about the media in a little bit. Businesses, right? Our businesses in our jurisdiction. It's always good to have good relationships with the businesses, especially if you have some type of major event and you have some restaurants in town and you need to feed some people. Make nice with those folks. And then any type of nonprofit organizations, like we did a lot of work with the Lions Club. And then these relations can be done by having meetings, bringing them in for tours, working on different projects, special events, and utilizing social media. So what are some of the message topics that we should be reviewing with our folks as far as public education goes? Find the message that you want the audience to understand, that this could be challenging for them, and we want to make sure that they know about this particular thing. So number one, when and when not to call 911. That's a hot topic. How to call 911. So how to call from your cell phone, how to call from your home phone, how to call from VoIP and Skype and all these other things that are now going to, are able to send 911. There's jewelry out there that I can press a button and call 911. So how to call 911, and then what to say when calling, and explain to folks the importance of, trying to stay calm, take a deep breath. I ask a lot of questions. The reason why I ask a lot of questions is for this reason. It's not delaying response. So getting that information out there. Sharing a topic of MLTS and VoIP systems and some of the complications that we can have with that. And that plays on Carey's Law and Ray Baum's Act. Wireless location. Think about how many people have no idea that wireless location can be a challenge for 911. Texting capabilities and the protocol-based dispatching. Yes, we're going to ask you questions. We're going to ask them in a certain order. We need you to answer those questions, and it's not delaying a response. So those are some of the message topics that they recommend. And then also sharing your wins, right? So this is a call from last year, City of Cincinnati. They had a CPR save. These are things, every center that I work with, when I do a leadership and agency assessment and I ask like morale, and I will ask in the survey, have you been praised for a job well done? If so, how were you praised? And very few folks are saying that they were praised for like a major incident. And every center I work with, I talk about the importance of utilizing social media, but not just using it to tell people that the clocks are changing and change your smoke detector batteries. We should be highlighting our people all the time. Now, some may argue, why am I going to pat them on the back for doing their job? Because we want the public to see the amazing things that telecommunicators are doing. Number one, it clears up any misconceptions. So if we have a CPR save here, we can say, using a protocol based 911 emergency medical dispatch program allows us to ask pertinent questions to give appropriate CPR instructions. So it clears up any of the misconceptions. It shows the work that you do. It may even help with funding. Folks start seeing you and what you're doing. And then it could help with hiring challenges, right? If they don't know what a dispatcher is, but get yourselves out there on social media and get yourself out there in other types of groups as well. As far as the different target audiences go, there are different types of targeted audiences. So adults, children's, teens, and seniors. Every one of those messages are going to be a little bit different. And the tools that you're going to provide them could be different. Like, I'm not going to necessarily speak to 5-year-olds about cyberbullying or how to keep your safe self online, but I'm going to do that for the teenagers. But I will teach the 5-year-olds how to call 911 on a cell device, because if I'm just teaching them on their phone, most people don't even have a home phone, etc. Americans with disabilities, explaining what the options are for them, especially text to 911 that many of them may not know is available. Special needs community, MLTS users, non-English speaking callers, reassure them we have options to call the language line. A lot of folks that don't speak English do not want to call 911. They don't feel safe calling 911 because they don't think that they're going to be able to be accommodated. So sharing that information is important. Field responders. I used to do a communications class for all of my field responders. It doesn't always help. They still just key the mic and talk. They don't wait for acknowledgement. They step all over each other. They think we're withholding information, but it is good to work with those folks. Public government officials. I wish I did this more. I thought my government folks knew what I was doing, but apparently they didn't. And I learned that towards the end of my tenure there, but they thought they knew what I was doing, but they didn't. And they didn't understand the magnitude of making major changes that were going to affect our department. And they just they made decisions based on financial saving financial cost, etc. And it's sad that happens, but building all these relations, public relations, are really important. So what are some ways to get the message out? Now, I got billboards up there as the first thing, but over here, this little billboard, we're not going to do this on a billboard. If anyone was from North Carolina that got calls on this particular, or at Christmas time, there are folks that are creating like little swinging folks like the Clark Griswold hanging off their house, stringing the lights. While it's cute, it might solicit some 911 calls. But I've seen 911 call billboards, call if you can, text if you can't type things, PSAs using your local news channel, having open houses or tours of the center, public safety fairs, national night out, any type of other fair, right? I'm sure if there's a major fair that comes into your jurisdiction, get some high energy, people driven folks, get them some pamphlets and stickers and books and head them on over there and get folks to understand. You may even get some folks that want to apply for some of those positions. Visiting the schools, the Council on Aging, assisted living, and larger facilities. Using printed materials such as mailings and newsletters, electronic media, email lists and text messages that will go out, using social media, and then partner with other companies that are in your jurisdiction. Okay, that might want to work with you. And then utilize the community resources that you have. So colleges, vocational schools, and marketing interns. Nobody thinks to use these when it comes to the community resources. I know that there was a lot of pamphlets that we had made. We'd go right to the vocational school here in our town in the printing graphic design. All they charged us for was the materials. We didn't have to pay for them to make it. It was a learning experience. Any type of college has a marketing intern, enlist them. Imagine how good it would be on their resume to be like, hey, I did the, the PR and the social media for such and such a communication center. Utilizing the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts, the fire and crime prevention officers. So I have 2 fire department pictures here. Recently, our captain went and shared some valuable information with the seniors at the COA. And the bottom one is my husband, the deputy fire chief, doing some deputy fire chief explanations for the kindergartners from the school next door. And then utilizing nurses, teachers, daycare, and churches, right? Go into the schools. I know that the kindergartners, they want folks to come in and teach their students about 911. You can start teaching the 3-year-olds at the daycare centers. Ask the churches, can we come in and talk to folks? One of the biggest challenges we have is our callers, right? And the way they call the call in and not understanding. The responsibility falls on us to explain what it is that we're doing. They don't know that we're dispatching help. So tell them, as soon as we get to this place in the call, we're already dispatching help to you. Just know that I'm asking all these questions to help you, to get a better response, to make sure the appropriate response is coming, to update my responders, to make sure they come in with the right equipment. Imagine how much that'll help those folks that are calling. And then the media relations. It is so very important to have a good relationship with the media. Number one, you need to have an agency policy. Okay. Sorry, my dog's barking. My daughter should be taking care of it in a second. So you have to have an agency policy. So the policy in my center was that the telecommunicator did not speak to the media at all. Basically, they would say, we have nothing to report at this time. Let me get your name, your fax number, your email, whatever it is, and we'll get that passed on at a later time. They wouldn't say there's nothing going on. I know some folks will say, nope, there's nothing going on. They know there's something going on, but by saying I have nothing to report at this time, it just lets them know that that they want the info and we'll get it to them as soon as possible. When possible, have a PIO, a public information officer. Give the PIO a heads up. The PIO isn't always on duty when the squid is hitting the sand. So give them a text message or shoot them a quick call and say, hey, we have a major incident, just letting you know, you're going to have to come up with something. Okay. And they may even have a press release template where they can just kind of fill in the blanks and just give them the basics, right? Knowing the media, having their contact names and numbers in advance and building a rapport with them. And that means even having a meeting with them in advance. Say, look, when my dispatchers are in there and it's chaos, I can't have you calling in there, but I promise you, as soon as we have the time to put a press release together, we will send it to you. Give us the best number and email address you want that sent to, and then do it for, not even major incidents. Do it so you show them that you are keeping up with what you promised, right? So maybe it's a major motor vehicle accident. Maybe there's a string of the house breaks or something. Just give them something that they're not expecting so they'll be able to trust you and they're not going to call you in the middle of it. If you know there's going to be a large event, let them know beforehand. Let the media know beforehand, and you can give them information that they might be able to share with the public on your behalf. Maybe there's a major storm coming, right? And you don't want people calling you when the power goes out. So you come up with a little blurb that says, the top 5 things that you need to know with the upcoming storm. Don't call 911 about your power out. The highway department will be plowing the main roads first, whatever it is that you need to let them know. Let them know in advance and see if they can help you get that information out. And then take control. Okay. Tell them what you need, be prompt, and then fax and email them something when it is ready. But don't tick them off. You tick off the media, it is not going to end well for you. And now we'll jump into the health and safety topic that is in your study guide. So the first part is going to be EAP, Employee Assistance Programs. So as far as the EAP programs go, mental health it's a mental health assistance program to help with not only professional but personal problems that may affect your job performance. So any type of health situations, mental health and well-being topics, financial stuff. A lot of folks think that EAP is just for issues that they have at work, and that's not the case. If you're having an issue outside of work and you need to get that taken care of to be able to be your best self at work, an EAP program is there for that situation. They may also work with management to prevent poor working conditions, so proactively provide services and things to help folks in the area of mental health and any term of well-being. These are free short-term assessments and counseling. Now, while that definition or that piece is in your manual, I'm adding the asterisk sentence there. If you should want to participate in any type of EAP program, when you find a provider or you move through the system and the process, the first question you should ask the provider that you end up with is, do they take your insurance? One of the problems I ran into when I was going through my stuff at my agency, I did utilize EAP for a short time. But what ultimately happened is I found somebody that I really enjoyed working with, and they did not take my insurance. So once the EAP portion was up, I wasn't going to be able to stay with them. It didn't make sense to me that happened, but there's a lot that didn't make sense to me that happened there. So just make sure that you double check with your insurance before starting any EAP program. And it's generally voluntary. However, some agencies may mandate should the need arise. Some agencies I know have used the EAP program as kind of an ultimatum, knowing that their folks are struggling or a particular person is struggling, and that a condition of them keeping their employment, they need to work through the process of speaking to someone through EAP. So while generally it's voluntary, there are times that it can be set up as a mandatory situation, more often than not, an ultimatum. They also work with managers in a consultative role to address employee and organization challenges. So know that that's there for you, right? Not just for the exam wise, but know that EAP programs, if you're struggling, if you're wanting to find out how to implement wellness programs, et cetera, they're able to help you assist with that as well. And this includes helping to prevent and cope with workplace violence, trauma, and any other emergency response situations. The next section is CISM, Critical Incident Stress Management. So while this section is in our E&P study guide, there are other ways that folks choose to go about any type of debriefing and diffusing situations. But this is what they are utilizing for exam purposes. So workplace stress is the health epidemic of the 21st century, with an estimated cost of $300 billion a year. That's a lot of money. It is a comprehensive, integrative, multi-component crisis intervention system. So we not only deal with folks that are dealing with a particular critical situation and incident, it is always also an intervention system or a prevention system as well. Interventions range from before the crisis happens and acute crisis to after the crisis. So a good critical incident stress management program is going to hit all three components of the crisis: the pre-crisis, while the crisis may be happening, as well as post-crisis, to check in with our folks. CISM is a psychological first aid for first responders. I'm not sure why that definition is there. That second bullet there is there for a second time. But the third piece here is it can be used in various sized groups, either individually, small groups, larger groups, with families and organizations. So what I'm hoping to see a lot more of is our families getting support that they need. And this is another component of that. So super cool. There are two useful interventions. I do recall seeing something about defusing and debriefing on my exam. So I just wanted to kind of put this out there. And this is a Tracy's tip on how to remember which one is which. So defusing is what's going to happen first. So think of it as a bomb that is about to blow, right? So you have the fuse on the bomb. And if you don't diffuse that bomb rather quickly, it is going to be, or could potentially be, disastrous, right? So the diffusing piece of it is short, quick, while we're in the midst of the chaos. It is 3 phases, structured in small groups. It's usually a discussion few hours after the incident, just to check in and say, hey, know that we had a really bad incident. Want to make sure that everybody is okay right now. These are some quick things that you should be looking for over the next couple of days. Let us know if you need anything in the short term, but just know that we're going to do more of a debriefing later. So the diffusing is basically, going like this, oops, and stopping that fuse from continuing on to a potential explosion. The debriefing is not actually brief. It takes place a little while after, right? So time goes by, so that's not brief. And then it is actually a 7-phase structured group discussion, 1 to 10 days after the incident. So it's not brief. It's more in depth. It's more in detail. It's more focused. It's more educational. It has more things involved. So it's definitely not brief. So if you need to remember the difference between diffusing, I want you to remember that image of the bomb and the person talking, and it's very quick. We need to just do a quick check-in. And if we don't kind of diffuse that bomb, it could lead to disastrous results. And then the debriefing is actually where we dig further into it, and it's not brief. It's not a quick check-in. So that tells you that there's more steps. So 3 phases versus 7 phases. And the debriefing is actually going to dig in deeper to all of the components. What was your role? How did you feel? How are you exhibiting any symptoms of trauma, etc.? What it is not is a critique of the incident. So need to make sure that that's out there as well. So CISM interventions are, they can be anything from, sorry, stress management education, stress resistance, and resilience. And while we're not going to get into the difference between resistance and resilience, we will talk about resilience, but resistance, stress resistance, is just not allowing things to stress us out, understanding that everything happens for a reason, that there are things that are out of our control, having education and understanding. I'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the suicide aspect, and 988, the importance of just resisting stress and keeping it at bay. So the majority of our stress is in our head. We create these situations, and then the resilience piece we'll get a little bit more into. Some more CISM interventions is crisis mitigation training for both individuals and organizations, one-on-one crisis intervention and counseling, family crisis intervention, and organizational consultation. There's a lot of folks that are getting into the mental health and wellness space, and I love to see this. It is not an either or solution. There are so many valuable tools out there, and they should all be being utilized. Finding what's best for your agency is super important, and making use of those tools is even more important. Just having them and saying you have them is one thing. Utilizing them and using them is very clearly another. So we're going to touch base briefly on PTSD and what that is by definition. As many of you know, I speak very passionately about this topic, but for testing purposes and manual purposes and information purposes, we only have a couple of slides on it. And I want to say it's briefly mentioned, but I want you to think of this whole section as part of that PTSD understanding and process. Mental health professionals widely use an official clinical diagnosis by the American Psychiatric Association to describe and treat the condition of a person who meets the following criteria. And so what is used for that criteria is the American Psychiatric Association Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM-5. We are currently in the DSM-5. I'm sure they're moving towards creating the DSM-6 because we're dealing with a lot more these days and have a lot more understanding of different mental disorders and behavioral disorders. But the components of PTSD are listed there in front of you. So you have to have been exposed to a traumatic event. These experiences could trigger symptoms from 3 clusters of signs and symptoms. So the first subcluster is intrusive recollections. That could be flashbacks, intrusive thoughts, bad dreams. The next group is avoidance and numbing symptoms. That could be physically avoiding places or mentally and cognitively avoiding using substances and behaviors. And then hyperarousal symptoms that can include feelings of being on edge, hypervigilant, anxiety, startle response, etc. And then these symptoms have to occur for over a month's time and be affecting your everyday life. So first and foremost, forget the test for a minute. If any of those things sound familiar to you and you're finding yourself here, you want to chat offline, let me know. But the criteria for diagnosis is, yes, some of these things will happen after a particularly bad incident, but there's a couple of key things. Number one, they have to be going on for over a month's time. And number two, they have to be causing distress or impairment in your social, occupational, or other areas of your functioning. So a lot of folks don't want to be diagnosed with PTSD. I don't understand why. I think it is very important to be diagnosed. If it is a condition that you have, it can explain a lot of things and help you understand a lot of what you might be going through. And just like being a type 1 diabetic, if somebody tells you that you now have type 1 diabetes, I would assume that you're going to do a little research, have a better understanding of what you can do, what you can't do, what you can eat, what you can't eat. And I think that's the first step in figuring this thing out is, number one, admitting there's a problem. Number two, seeking help for that problem. So I'll get off my soapbox on that for a minute. Our telecommunicators endure stress at levels higher than most professions. And as you know, we're often overlooked in that. So just know that you do experience higher levels of stress than many professions. Research indicate that the risk of telecommunicators developing traumatic stress disorders is significantly higher than those of the general public. And then in a study by Dr. Lilly and Heather Price, way back when, one of the first studies that Dr. Lilly did, and it showed that 18 to 24% of telecommunicators are showing signs and symptoms of PTSD. Not necessarily, she didn't diagnose them with it, but they're showing signs of it. And what I do know is she is doing ongoing study work. And if you have not filled out her survey, check out Dr. Michelle Lilly on Facebook. I've shared the survey. If you want to participate in the survey, just shoot me an email and I will be happy to get you a copy of that, because we are still trying to learn more and grow in our understanding of PTSD and mental health in our 911 space. NIOSH, the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, has partnered with our industry to create model stress reduction programs. One of them, way back when, like 2010-ish, was to create a standard. Just one of them was to create the standard when it came to mental health in 911. In your manual, if you're following along in the order of which I'm going and the book goes, you will see the standard that is listed there as the 911 acute/traumatic and chronic stress management standard. That's the 2013 standard. It has since hit the refresh button, and it is now this NENA standard to protect the well-being of 911 professionals. The study guide needs to be updated with that new standard title in that location. But it was the first standard, and now we have the updated standard, which I will talk a little bit more about at the end of this section. So general wellness, most first responders lack the knowledge about how to cope, about the how to cope part of stress training. If you think about it, the majority of the training that we received early on, and when I say early on, I mean like a few years ago, when it came to mental health and wellness in the 911 space, when I started as a baby dispatcher in 96, there wasn't any, none, zip, zilch, nada. But when we go back to the beginning, when we started talking about PTSD and mental health and stress and all of that, a lot of the training that we did talked about what to look for, what to be on the look, what could happen to our body, what could happen to our mind, etc. Many of the trainings did not talk about how to cope, how to be resilient, how to put the tools in place, what treatments to do, etc. Way back when, we had a suck it up, be strong, it's part of the job mentality, and we know that that did not work out well for us. So we are changing that narrative. We are working hard to break the stigma that telecommunicators are part of the 911 first responder, part of the first responder community. There should be a quote there. We're working hard to break the stigma that TCs are not part of the first responder community. We know that we have folks that wholeheartedly believe it, and then folks that don't. And for those that don't, that's okay. That's on them. I don't know why it's a big deal to them. It's, you know, it's one of those things that lighting a candle with another candle doesn't take away the flame from the other candle. So we have to get better at understanding that each of us holds a different place in the first responder role, and usually the dispatcher is that first link in that public safety chain. The second study that has been I don't want to say in progress, but there was more information that came out with Dr. Lilly and Allen in 2015. So that was, they'd mentioned some of this stuff is coming from there. And the National Wellness Institute defines wellness in general as a conscious, self-directed, and evolving process of achieving full potential. Whatever it is that your full potential is, whether it's mind, body, spirit, etc., because it is a multi-dimensional and holistic approach encompassing your lifestyle, mental and spiritual well-being, and the environment in which you choose to reside in. There are wellness dimensions that consist of physical, which is your diet, rest, relaxation, and sleep, which we don't do enough of in any of those aspects. Our mental component, cognitive, emotional, and spiritual. And I don't mean spiritual as in religiously, but spiritual as in how your mind works and what you think and why things happen, etc. Whatever your higher power is. Your professional dimension is your social networking when it comes to your professional relationships, but also your relationships inside of the PSAP. And then economical and financial dimensions to wellness, income, retirement, and your financial well-being. And many of us, you know, especially in this profession, where it's not a very high paying profession, despite the nature of the work, are struggling financially. And that can it can have long-term effects on your wellness. It can be measured with and without metrics. So when you look at each one of those components, your physical dimensions can be measured by your body mass index, your cholesterol, your blood pressure, your blood glucose. Your financial dimensions can be assessed by your cash flow, any debt that you have, what does your retirement look like? And then your social dimension can be evaluated or measured by how often you're isolating, the number of friends you have outside the PSAP, how often are you smiling outside of the PSAP, or just in general, etc. So those are things that can be measured with and without metrics. And then what are some of the obstacles to good wellness? This is such a powerful statement. I say this each time, is wellness is easy to understand, but it's really hard to maintain. It is a no-brainer that if you get more sleep, you eat better, you exercise, you think positively, then things in your life are going to be relatively good. But yet we can't seem to maintain those things. We fall back in patterns that are easier. One of the biggest obstacles to this type of work is shift work, right? So we have no choice but to work shift work. A lot of times we don't have a consistent schedule. We can't get into a routine. We're sleeping when other people, so lack of sleep in our overnights. We're sleeping when our life and everybody in our life is awake, which can cause stress. We don't always eat the healthiest in 911 centers. The environment itself, which we'll talk about environmental stressors in just a few minutes, and then unhealthy guilt. I've been doing a lot of research and understanding about guilt, and in the 911 center, guilt plays a huge role in our mental wellness. A lot of times we absorb or feel like we could have done better. What if I had just, if I had only? And I will tell you, one of the biggest things that a doctor said to me after a really tragic call when I went to the debriefing with the emergency room staff, it was a critical call, and they invited everybody involved to their debriefing at the hospital. And the attending doctor that was there had said that there was nothing that anyone involved in that call would have done differently that would have changed the outcome of that call. And I can't tell you the magnitude of those words. And that's why I think sometimes it's really just important to have a conversation with folks after a situation, is because you never know if someone's holding on to something that could resurface later. Sometimes just talking about something or offloading information will solicit that response from somebody that, while yes, you may think that, there's nothing anyone would have that could have they done differently that would have changed the outcome of that call. And those are very powerful words. I can say that from experience. It is important to understand that all of these components greatly impact how we respond to stressful situations, and can greatly affect the positivity of the workplace culture. So I do a lot of assessments with 911 centers. I've mentioned this before, and I can tell you that there are a lot of broken 911 telecommunicators. And when we are broken, we are not ourselves. We are no longer our happy, jovial, positive, want to talk to people, want to engage people selves. And if somebody had asked me, what is the biggest issue? Now, the irony is, in the assessments that I'm doing, the highest percentage of reasons why people are leaving their 911 center is coming back that it is issues with leadership. I want to take this with a grain of salt because I actually have data that is the highest percentage, right? So when I ask the question, have you thought of leaving your center in the last 6 months? If the answer is yes, it sends them to a different question, and that different question asks for the reason why. And the reasons why are trouble with or PTSD and mental health, or PTSD and burnout, financial reasons, lack of advancement opportunities, difficulty with my immediate supervisor, leadership as a whole, or D, all of the above. And out of all of those results, the highest percentage is including leadership, when in reality, I think it is also based on the mental health and wellness of the entire team as a whole. That's just my personal opinion, because when we're not doing well mentally, then we're not treating each other with kindness. We're not treating each other properly. We're short fused, we're angry, we're lashing out. And I think it all has something to do with each other. That's why almost every class that I teach, I start off with a mental health check-in. Because if it's a leadership class, you have to check in with yourself to make sure that you're doing okay. Because if you're not doing okay, you're not treating others okay. If I'm doing a class on liability and proper call handling, we have to do a mental health check, because if you're not doing okay, you're not being vigilant. You're maybe complacent, having a bad attitude, not speaking to callers well. So it is all relevant and relative to each other. Resilience. That word didn't look like it was spelled right, but I'll check it and make sure. Sorry, I'm drinking a little bit more, but my throat is on fire. So as far as resilience goes, in 2012, a consortium of clinicians offered the American Psychological Association a brief discussion on resilience. This was the provided definition of resilience: the process of adapting well in the face of the things that you see listed there. I'm going to break them down separately over here. It is the process of adapting in the face of adversity. What are the things that are listed as adversity? It could be anything from financial issues, trauma, a tragedy that happens, any type of threats to you, whether they're intentional threats or perceived threats. A perceived threat, another word for that is a paper tiger. Look that up, it's interesting. because it's not a matter of an actual threat. It's just it could be a perceived threat as well. Any type of significant stress or health issues. Your brain and how you think about the situation and the tools that you have in your toolbox are going to certifiably be what helps you either navigate through it or get lost within it. Resilience is not just about bouncing back, it's about personal growth. Over the last 5 years, I have put so much into my own personal growth, and I'm getting to reap the benefits of that and see the rewards every single day in every situation that I put myself in. There are so many situations that I dealt with that were on that previous page that were part of my trauma, part of me not being in the greatest mental health and mind space. But it's using those tools, becoming resilient. I always joke that I am the epitome of a Chumbawamba song. And if you know what I'm talking about, it goes something like this. I get knocked down, but I get up again. And I'm not singing today. Sometimes I sing it, but I get knocked down, but I get up again. And I can tell you that these days, because of my resilience, because of the work that I've put in, the tools that I've put in my toolbox, the resilience is what you make it. I watch from a distance, and there are folks that really need to work on their resilience capabilities. Just because something bad doesn't happen doesn't mean it's the end. Just because you have a series of unfortunate events doesn't mean it's the end and that nothing good is ever going to happen. It's how you shift your mind. I don't know why this is mentioned in the manual, but it is. So here's the information for you. The California Post has created a program to build wellness capital to navigate high stress situations and promote personal and organizational resilience. It's a 2-month program. It includes course instruction and weekly assignments, and it gears towards upholding the wellness of 911 professionals, and it depends on their access to core resilience resource such as peer support. And we're going to talk about peer support in a minute. Resilience programs are becoming something that truly needs to be more a part of 911 centers. That's why I encourage folks when I do assessments of the centers and provide guidance and recommendations. I always recommend starting a wellness committee of folks that are driven to make things better. And part of that is creating within that a resiliency program. What are the tools that we're going to put in place for our folks to help them become more resilient, especially for our new telecommunicators? We have to build their resiliency. Things are very different these days. As far as peer support goes, it is when assistance is provided by someone who shares a commonality with another person based on experience with a particular or similar situation or event. Your peers, we've gone through similar things. There are many forms of peer support, but at the end of the day, there's only one goal, and that goal is to support the cognitive and emotional and psychological well-being of those dealing with personal and work-related stress. Okay, so coming together as a group, supporting each other, that is the ultimate goal. It is important to note that while the most basic form, and we'll talk a little bit about the components of peer support and some pieces that have to be in place. And I'm going to guide you to the recent document from Nina on peer support. But the most basic form of peer support is found in daily, positive, supportive interactions between friends and coworkers. Reaching in, asking people how they're doing, not just saying, "How are you?" because they're going to say fine and they're going to be lying. I always encourage folks, thanks to buddy Ryan Dedman to ask them with some type of metric. Okay. How are you? I'm fine. Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best you've ever been in your life, what number are you at? I think you'll find that there are a lot of folks that are pretty low numbers. And what that does is it allows you to open a dialogue, not just asking one question. How are you? How are you sleeping? How are you eating? How's the family? Are you doing anything fun outside of the 911 center? Things like that. What peer support is not, it is not intended to replace any type of professional counseling, psychotherapy, or any other types of mental professional services. It's to support each other, the familiarity. One of the things that some clinical providers lack is the understanding of the actual job that we do. It's always a plus and a bonus if you find somebody that is well versed in understanding what it is that you actually do. But that isn't always the case. So sometimes even just having a sounding board for somebody that is familiar, that understands what you do every day is important. Peer support teams should work closely with mental health professionals and EAP to offer support and foster a safe and confidential environment for those who choose to participate. Keyword there, underlined, exclamation point, starred, is choose to be a part of it. And what I will say about that is we can't make folks want to be mentally well. We can't make them participate in programs such as peer support. But if we encourage all and we make it a safe environment and we pick the right people to be involved and do the right things, I think you'll find that most people will participate. And just because someone doesn't want to participate doesn't mean that there is a problem with them. It's just some personalities don't engage in things like that. So don't take it personally and don't take offense to that. It's just some cultures and natures and personalities, they just don't share. And that's okay too. Some of the paramount parts of a peer support program is, first of all, picking the team. The team should consist of a whole range of folks. We need people-driven people. We need task-driven people. We need trustworthy people. I'm watching a couple of agencies put peer support groups together, and there are some folks that their feelings are getting a little hurt because they're not being asked or being able to be part of the peer support team. And some folks are just not people where others feel comfortable speaking to them. So the picking of the team is very important. Training is important. There is so much valuable training out there. And not only is there training, there are stellar peer support programs out there that have already been implemented, already in place. Ask for their models, ask for their policies, ask for their procedures, ask how they're doing it, jump on a call with others. Super important to not reinvent the wheel. There's so many amazing folks out there that have such great peer support programs in their centers, and they should be super proud of them. Trust and confidentiality is really important. Again, it comes down to picking the right team, but the importance of trust and confidentiality. And what that means sometimes is maybe working with another agency close to you, and building a kind of a regional team makes sense. And I say that because, number one, what if you have a peer support team, that's great, but what if it's your agency that has taken the significant hit and the majority of your peer support folks are actually struggling? You need to have your backup, right? Number two, what if I want to reach out to peer support, but I don't want it to be somebody from my agency? And then there has to be supervision and oversight of all peer support programs. We can't have folks running rogue. There has to be checks and balances, and we have to make sure that folks are behaving and they're not acting out of a scope of any practice that they should be following. here is where you can find the standard from NINA. I know that JC Ferguson and Pam Apoka were the chair folks of this particular document, and they did a phenomenal job. Anything and everything you need to know about peer support is in this document. And so while I post the links and in the PDF, sorry, in the PDF, you can usually just click on the link. This one might not allow you to just click it because it will never allow Chrome -extension to be next to each other, no matter how small I make it. So you may just have to copy and paste that link, or you can just Google the NINA Peer Support Team Development, Implementation, and Oversight document, or go to the NINA standards website and search peer, and it will appear there as well. So this was mentioned in the manual, and one of the things that I know, and I've mentioned this before, is that if I provide a link here that was in the manual, there's an understanding from NINA that this is a place where they may pull information from. So I recommend checking it out. This is a different little subsection. Not going to go too far into this, but it is listed here. And while at first I couldn't quite understand why it was listed here, it didn't really make sense to me as to why we're talking about wellness in the 911 center. But now we're going to switch for a second and talk about call handling of crisis calls, etc. But it makes sense now. So in addition to the previous resources, the well-being and resilience of the 911 professional also depend on how well prepared and equipped they are to manage highly stressful calls, including mental crisis and suicide risk. An initial study indicates improved confidence, self-perceived effectiveness, and reduced anxiety in those who completed Emergency Health Dispatcher Training, EMHD, and utilized a 911 suicide protocol. This makes total sense now. This article here is mentioned in the manual. Takes a little to find it, but I've provided it here. You can click on that link there, or Google measure the impact of training on emergency medical dispatch management of general mental crisis calls and suicide calls. Dr. Jim Marshall, Dan Asherwood, Angie Fox, and Jim Sokup were the folks that worked on this, and it's pretty impressive. Think about when you were a baby dispatcher, right? The amount of stress that you had when you didn't confidently feel like you were handling a call well, or you weren't sure about how to handle a call. This document talks about the importance of having protocols in place, having policies and procedures in place, and being prepared to handle calls appropriately. It helps with the mental health and wellness of the telecommunicator. So that's what you need to know about that little section right there. As of the last recent exams and in the study guide, they have added 988. Well, in the manual is titled Suicide Hotline, but this section is going to address that, as well as 988 as it pertains to the exam. And there are questions on 988 on the exam that I do know. Initially, the suicide hotline was available. This is information that is listed in the manual. I don't think you need to know it, and I'm not sure I 100% agree with it, but in 2018, suicide was the leading cause of death in the US, with just over 48,000 lives being claimed. I don't know about those numbers. I don't feel warm and fuzzy about those numbers. And I just want to say that as well, because I don't just regurgitate facts or data that I see. They're listed in the manual. But as far as the next sentence in the manual goes, the manual says that there are 170 crisis centers that have been created to house the suicide hotline. But the NINA article that I'm going to reference says 200. Whether or not that's a question, I don't know. I just wanted to point out that there's about 30 crisis center difference there. So wanted to point that out for you. The suicide hotline becomes 988 and then has to work with 911. You can't just create something like this and then not work. This picture was taken. I work with the city of Cincinnati on some contract work, and this was a really cool day. Bill Vidra there on the left, my teammates, Mike Boucher next to me, and then Tony Harrison on the end. And then the folks from the Cincinnati 988 program. We got to take a field trip there and see where the 988 calls go for the city of Cincinnati and many other places across the country. This agency answers a lot of calls for 988 calls. And if you have not had the opportunity to visit the place that is answering your 988 calls, I highly recommend doing it. It put a lot into perspective for me. The reason why we went there, or what sparked the interest, was when the team and I, Tony, Mike, and I, were talking to Bill Vidra about 988 and how Cincinnati was going to handle these calls. There was reference being made to that some suicide callers that come into 911 are actually going to be transferred to the 988 folks. And I was like, what? And so not to go down that rabbit hole, I was just very concerned. What if somebody calls 911, why would we be sending them to 988, and are they qualified to do that? And it took one simple sentence. This is what they do all day, every day. And they talk thousands of people a day. 988 talks thousands of people a day out of taking their own life. And this is their area of expertise, and they have resources in place. And it was a really eye-opening experience to go visit the folks there. And I think sometimes we forget that they're over there being that that roadblock between that caller calling 911 because something happened or could potentially happen. So just wanted to share that tidbit. There isn't a lot in the manual on 988, but there are questions on 988. So I reached out to the folks at NINA and I said, just curious, what resource should I be providing them to be able to prepare for the exam? And it is this article right here. So in the call, issue 41, the link is there. And the article by April Heinze, 988, the new National Suicide Hotline and Behavioral Health Crisis Line. The information on the next couple of slides is taken from this particular article. So I've kind of done an overview for you, but check out this article. This is where some of that information is coming from that you should be made aware of. So the 988 timeline looks like this. In 2018, Congress passed the National Suicide Prevention Improvement Act. That act directed the FCC, excuse me, directed the FCC to coordinate with SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and the Department of Veteran Affairs to conduct a study. In that study, they examined the feasibility of designating a 3-digit dialing code for the National Suicide Prevention and Mental Health Crisis Hotline. Up until this stuff started happening, we had the suicide hotline, which meant if I'm going to commit suicide, then I call the hotline. if you notice, there's starting to be a transition from it just being a suicide hotline to a mental health crisis hotline. So that's one of the bigger components here. The law also directed the FCC, SAMHSA, and the VA to analyze the effectiveness of the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline as it is today. In May of 2020, Congress passed the National Hotline Designation Act of 2020. And if you can't remember the date, I'm just going to say, maybe make a reference to the year. That might tell you a lot, right? 2020 shifted a lot of thought processes for folks. In July of 2020, the FCC adopted rules to establish 988 as the nationwide 3-digit number for Americans in crisis to connect with suicide prevention and mental health counselors. It is not just about suicide prevention anymore. The official effective date for service providers is July 16th, 2022. This says, in the effective date says that service providers must divert all 988 calls to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. So it's almost like a call forwarding feature. 988 itself isn't what sends the call along. 988 is the designation. It's like dialing an extension, picking up your phone, and I'm going to dial the extension 988, and it's going to send me where it needs to go. It's not an actual phone number, if you will, just like 911. 911 is attached to an actual phone number. Okay. So what is it? Let's go back just a little bit. Hold on one second. Okay. 988 is a 3-digit dialing code for 988. The goals of the particular lifeline are to provide immediate confidential counseling to somebody in distress, de-escalate suicidal or distressed thoughts, and connect people with local resources when appropriate. I think it's really important to say, as I always do, this isn't just about taking an exam. Know that 9188 is there for you also. I know there are times I've had to call my own 988, my folks, my resources. There are folks that don't have those tools or those people in place. Calling or texting 988 is an option for you as well. As mentioned before, the Lifeline is a network of over 200 independent crisis centers across the US and territories. How will 988 and 911 and 988 work together? In rare but critical circumstances, less than 2% of the time, counselors will determine via their protocols that someone is at imminent risk of harming themselves or someone else, and those calls will have to be transferred to 911. Unfortunately, though, 988 cannot directly transfer the call to 911 because the 988 calls are routed by area code. So that's a problem, right? So the 988 operator must take the information today. This is how the system works. Hopefully this is going to change at someday in the future. But there is no geospatial routing. It's based on area code. So if I have a 774 area code and I am in Kentucky, 774 is the Massachusetts area code. So that call is actually going to get routed back to Massachusetts, but I might not be in Massachusetts. So I don't even know who I'm really speaking to. So when that call gets routed, now that 988 telecommunicator needs to determine where's the 911 center that this call has to go? So they're going to use their resources. I don't know if 988 has access to the NENA EPRC, but I think it's worth trying to get them that service. And if your agency has it and you're working closely with any 988 organizations in your jurisdiction, you can help them in that aspect. And I'll talk more about that resource in just a second. I've mentioned it before, but I'm going to mention it again here. So when somebody reaches out to 988 and the caller is in imminent danger and they need to contact 911, it's going to be a call from the 988 person that is handling the call. Most states do have a planning coalition working towards establishing 988. Those planning coalitions are required to have a 911 representative. If you want to know where 988 stands in your state, you can contact your state 911 administrator. If you don't know who yours is, excellent, thank you. 988 in Canada uses Northern 911 for routing. Great, excellent, excellent. If you don't know in the US, if you don't know who your 911 administrators are, you can reach out to the folks at NASNA through their website, nasna911.org/contact-911, and it will list who your state administrators are. I do want to have a disclaimer as well, is some of the information that's upcoming on who's where is listed in the article. It's mentioned here, but I don't see it being on the test because this is something that will change. But some of the considerations that need to be taken into consideration when 988 is being implemented and working with 911 is, as 988 moves forwards, state will have many technical and operational issues that need addressing. One of which being, if you had a 7-digit calling scheme, it had to be changed to 10 digits. So this is just New Hampshire had to do it recently. So as you can see there, by October 24th, 2021, the state of New Hampshire had to move from a 7-digit calling scheme to a 10-digit. And that's challenging. I remember being a kid here, when I talked about this in one of the earlier sessions, is I remember a time where if I was going to call my neighbor, I just had to dial the last 4 numbers of their phone number. And then I had to dial the extension, the middle numbers, and then I had to dial the area code. So there are some technical issues that need to be taken into consideration. Some more considerations is, can 988 transfer calls to 911? As mentioned, no, but hopefully someday in the future they can. Will it be feasible for 911 to transfer calls to 988? I know of agencies that are doing this. It scares the bejesus out of me, but as I mentioned, it's working. It's working to alleviate the stress on the 911 centers of that call handling, having somebody on the phone, not being trained appropriately, maybe not having protocols in place, having somebody who does this for a living 24/7, handles thousands of calls. It makes sense. It didn't at first, but it does now. Will an MOU be required for this work? Assuming yes, right? And what protocols must be in place to make 988 and 911 work together? Again, there are agencies that are starting to do this. There are forums and ways to reach out and find out who's doing what and working together. And I know that there's been some NENA working groups that are working on the 988 stuff. So check it out, get involved. Where is this study today? And again, this is according to the article, so I'm not going to really go into this. It is here if you should want to read it. But it's just, to me, it's kind of irrelevant information because the article was from last year. We're already a year in something past that article. So I have a feeling that this data is not currently accurate. What is accurate, though, is Provisionally, text to 988 was not available. From some of the research that I have done, text to 988 is now available. And then calls that are made to 988 in areas where no 988 exists, they will be kind of extension forwarded, as I mentioned, to the previous suicide hotline number, which is still in existence. For those folks that have access to it, it could still be listed in places, and it would be routed to the 800 number. There will be calls to the PSAP from 988. They may look up the area code and find an appropriate PSAP. However, we know this is an issue because of number portability. So even though I have a 774 phone number, if I was to move to Texas, I can take my phone with me, right? I can take my phone number with me. So there's no correlation between the area code and the agency. So what's going to happen is you might get somebody else's flaming bag of you know what, because the folks at 988 have done the work to try to find out where this call belongs based on the area code. It might not land where it's supposed to. So more information on the NINA suicide prevention standard is located here. But I just want to give you a couple more resources. So this is not part of the exam. This is an extra piece of information. If you Google search PSAP 988 playbook, it will bring you to this document right here. It helps folks if they're going to be implementing 988 as a 911 center, etc. Valuable information is located in that document. And if you are not familiar with the NINA EPRC, you need to get yourself access. If you Google NINA EPRC, it'll bring you to the website. Further down in the website, it will allow you to email and request access. Administrators get one access. Users on the front line get another access. The admin folks, the first responsibility you have is to go in there as soon as you get access and make sure that all the information for your agency in there is correct. This is a super helpful tool. It tells you who dispatches for what jurisdiction. You can look up an address and it'll tell you the jurisdiction in which it should be dispatched. If I have to call Hoboken, New Jersey, I can type that in. It's going to give me the 24/7 number into the 911 center. Because what I will tell you is one thing that we are not good at in public safety is putting the state on your website. I've had to look up a lot of 911 centers, and a lot of places will have the name of it and not the state. So if it's like Columbia County, I look up Columbia County 911 Center, it'll have all the information about Columbia County, but the only way I can tell what state it is if I Google the area code of the phone number that's listed on the website. So the EPRC tool is a huge must if you don't have access. And then just a couple more things I want to go over in the manual. There are some risk assessment tools that are listed. The first one, I'm not going to go over because as of today, I have received the official notification that the Wellness Assessment Matrix, the WAM, that some folks may have heard of in their CMCP class. You may have heard a little bit about it before. The actual WAM, Wellness Assessment Matrix, is no longer this. It has morphed into the Mindbase solution. If you have not heard of Mindbase, Google it. Reach out to Cassie Sexton or Ryan Chambers. They are two of our 911 heroes that are that work with Mindbase, that are very familiar to many of us. And they have absorbed this model and are moving forward with it and other versions. So I have confirmed there are no questions on this on the exam. So you can just take your manual and put an X through it, and I'm going to put a big X through this slide there, but it was just prior to the presentation that I got that notification. So I didn't have a chance to do that. But I also didn't want I didn't want to just take it out and not talk about it, because if you're going by your manual, the information is in there, and I don't want you to have to worry about studying it or understanding it. Another tool that is listed is the NINA Wellness Continuum. You can simply Google NINA Wellness Continuum. There's a microsite in there. There's lots of tools and resources that are available to you. And then it's the Resilient 911 Professional, a comprehensive guide to surviving and thriving together in the 911 Center by Dr. Jim Marshall and Tracy Lorenza, is listed as a wellness resource as well. So check out those tools. Another resource listed is the actual standard that I referred to before. Used to be called something else. Dr. Jim Marshall and I were the co-chairs for the update of that standard. Just to put into perspective, the 2013 standard for stress and trauma and all of that and wellness did not even include sleep. Not to take away from that standard. For the time, it was spot on. Where we are today, there was a lot more that needed to be added, and we worked really hard as a team with all the folks on that standard working group to present the document, the NINA standard, to protect the well-being of the 911 professional. So it can be found at that website there, and just click on this little red link. If you want to learn how to use the standard, head on over to my On Scene First website. I just noticed that I must have cut off the URL, but I will fix that in the PDF. If you go to onscenefirst.com/training/webinars, scroll down to the bottom, and the webinar on the right, using the NINA standard to protect the well-being of 911 professionals, is a webinar that Jim Marshall and I did on how to use the standard. There's a lot of valuable information in there. So that is still there. It's up there now. I am going to be updating the website at some point in the future, and it might live somewhere else. But for right now, it's there. It's going to be there for a while. Go ahead and check it out. And then the last section is environmental stressors. Our environmental stressors are more global than safety and security. And to put that into perspective, what they mean by safety and security is we're pretty safe in the 911 center, right? While you would think being housed maybe in a police department, it could be challenging. However, our environmental factors, as it pertains to our productivity, motivation, health, mindset, etc., the environmental factors are playing more of a role here. There are 5 elements that impact productivity and morale, and they start with temperature. I don't know how they know that 70.88 degrees is an optimal desk work temperature, but there we are. Some may agree, some may disagree. Noise control impacts our productivity and morale. It's usually controlled by acoustic. Well, first of all, the noise control, it accounts for the actual acoustics in the room and the people and chatter, etc. It's usually controlled by acoustic ceilings, fabric, carpet, etc. Crowding, people, partitions, plants. Air quality. This can be helped by regular maintenance and cleaning. It also lists cumulative trauma disorder. Now, if you were to see the word trauma, you would probably think mind. So just know that cumulative trauma disorder is not addressing the mind. It is addressing excessive wear and tear on tendons, muscles, and nerves. It's caused by continuous use over long periods of time. Engineering and ergonomics play a huge role here. The lighting, the furniture, making sure we have adjustable chairs and desks. How their workstation is set up plays a significant role on the physical well-being of the 911 center and can cause CTD to upper and mid-body extremities. So your arms, your shoulders, your elbow, your wrist, your neck, your back, okay, how you're sitting. Another thing that was looked at as far as environmental factors go is long work hours in an enclosed space. A 2023 study finds increased productivity by fixing sick building syndrome, adjusting the temperature to be a comfortable temperature, and the air quality in the center. It also was done by eliminating VOCs, volatile organic compounds. And if you're wondering what those things are, they're the image on the right kind of explains some of these things, but as well as the carpet, the paint, furniture, gases, and other workplace finishes. And then ergonomic training should be part of your training. I've seen, and I'm going to say that I did the same exact thing as far as how we sit at our consoles, or how we're hunched over or looking up or kick back, really does play a role in our physical wellness. And there you are. So that is the section on health and wellness, as I'm coming off of COVID for the fourth time, third time over the Christmas timeframe. But taking care of your health, your physical health, mental health, well-being is super important in everything that you do. So I have moved this slide to the end. If you are interested in checking out any of the things that we have to offer from On Scene First in our store, we have a few shirts listed. I'm going to be putting a little bit more time into this over the next couple of months. But if you want to check it out, there's the On Scene First store and my contact information. In the lower right-hand corner is a private Facebook group for first responders on mental health and wellness. And if you want to quickly reach out, you can do so by the quick contact form up in the right-hand corner. And my email is listed there should you have any questions. Until next time, heroes, stay safe, stay strong, stay here. We need you.